The valley lay in eerie stillness, a vast bowl of jagged cliffs and scattered boulders under the Afghan sun. Chief Petty Officer Mark Dalton crouched low, his boots crunching softly against loose gravel as he scanned the ridgeline through his optics. The air smelled of dust and gun oil, dry and sharp, clinging to his tongue. He didn't like the silence. It was the wrong kind of quiet, the kind that settled in just before hell broke loose. His team moved in a staggered formation. Behind him, 6 men in total, each weighed down with gear, rifles, and exhaustion from days of relentless patrols. Their mission had been simple on paper: push through the valley, confirm intel that the area was cold, and move to extraction. But Dalton had learned long ago that in Afghanistan, cold could turn to burning hot in the time it took to breathe. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Something was wrong. He raised a gloved hand, signaling a halt. Mason, the youngest of the team, barely 23, froze in place and dropped to a knee. Ramirez, carrying extra medical gear, adjusted his load and scanned the ridgeline through squinting eyes. Harris muttered under his breath, "Feels like a damn graveyard." Dalton ignored the comment, focusing on the slope ahead. No movement, no goats, no shepherds, not even the flutter of a scavenger bird. Afghans lived and moved everywhere in these valleys. For it to be empty, that was its own kind of warning. He tapped his radio once, low whisper. "Eagle Eye, this is Bravo 2. You got movement on the ridge." Static. He tried again, a little louder. "Eagle Eye, copy?" Nothing. His gut tightened. Maybe the mountain terrain was blocking comms. Maybe their Overwatch drone had shifted course. Or maybe the first shot cracked like lightning, slamming into the dirt 2 feet from his boots. "Contact!" Dalton roared, diving behind a boulder as the valley exploded in fire. Bullets screamed from the cliffs, tearing across open ground, sparking off rocks, chewing dust into choking clouds. His men scattered, seeking what little cover they could find. Mason dropped prone behind a thin ledge, cursing. Ramirez wasn't fast enough. One round ripped across his side, spinning him down with a guttural cry. "Ramirez is hit!" Hack shouted. The medic slided beside him, hands already soaked in crimson. Dalton raised his rifle, firing controlled bursts toward the flashes on the ridge. 4, maybe 5 shooters, all with elevation advantage. The enemy had them boxed in, perfect kill zone. Whoever planned this ambush knew the terrain, knew the timing. The SEAL team was pinned tight, and one bad move would cut them down to pieces. Dalton keyed his radio, voice low but urgent. "Bravo 2 in contact. Heavy fire. Grid coordinates requesting immediate support." Static. His pulse spiked. He switched frequencies, tried again. Nothing. Only the hiss of dead air. "Comms are fried," Harris yelled over the gunfire. Dalton yanked his backup from his vest, the emergency transmitter. It was old school, Morse capable, designed for exactly this scenario. He tapped the SOS. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. He repeated it, slow and deliberate, each tap echoing against the plastic in his hands. Then he waited, straining his ears for confirmation. Silence. The firefight raged on. Mason's panicked voice broke through. "Chief, we're screwed out here. No signal, no cover. They've got the high ground." Dalton gritted his teeth, his calm tone belying the storm inside. "Focus, Mason. You panic, you're dead. You hear me?" "Yes, Chief," Mason muttered, forcing himself to breathe. Dalton leaned out, firing again, aiming not to kill but to suppress, to keep the enemy's heads down. Each round sent brass clinking across the rocks, hot against his arm. He knew their ammo count. They couldn't burn through it. Survival meant discipline. He risked the glance at Ramirez. The medic had a rag pressed tight against the wound, blood soaking through fast. Ramirez's face was pale, lips trembling as he whispered, "Don't let me bleed out here, Chief." Dalton crouched beside him, eyes locking with his. "You're not dying today, brother, I promise." But promises meant nothing without rescue, and rescue wasn't coming. As the sun dipped lower, the battle became a war of patience. The insurgents stopped firing in bursts, shifting to sniper-style shots, each round precise, forcing the SEALs deeper into cover. Dust hung in the air thick enough to taste. Dalton wiped grime from his face, squinting through sweat, burning his eyes. He thought back to training, endless drills in Virginia swamps, the screaming instructors, the nights of cold ocean surf pounding him into grit. They had taught him that silence was the deadliest enemy. When a battlefield grew quiet, it was never mercy, it was the predator's pause before striking again. And now that silence came wrapped in static. Every SOS he tapped went unanswered. Dalton checked his watch. Hours had passed. His team shifted uncomfortably, bodies stiff from crouching too long. Mason whispered, "Why aren't they answering?" "Somebody's got to be listening." Dalton forced a calm reply. "We keep sending, someone will hear." But inside, doubt gnawed. Were they too far? Was their overwatch down? Or maybe command had written them off as lost already. Night fell, wrapping a valley in cold shadows. The moon rose pale and cruel, casting silver light across jagged stone. Every movement risked detection. The enemy rifles still fired sporadically, forcing the SEALs to stay low, to stay quiet. Ramirez drifted in and out of consciousness, the medic working desperately. Dalton lay on his back for a moment, staring at the stars. In another life, they might have looked beautiful. Now they just felt distant, indifferent. He tapped SOS again. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Waited. Nothing. The silence pressed down like a weight. His team's breaths came shallow, nerves stretched thin. Every man looked to him, waiting for answers he didn't have. He whispered to himself, steady and firm, a mantra for the men as much as for himself. "We are not ghosts yet. We fight, we lie, nobody dies here tonight." But deep inside, the truth burned. If silence held, if nobody was listening, their survival depended on carving an escape through a valley that wanted them dead. The moon hung like a pale blade above the valley, its light washing the jagged cliffs in silver and shadow. Mark Dalton pressed his back against the rock, listening to the hollow ring of silence that followed each burst of gunfire. The enemy had stopped shooting consistently, firing now and then like hunters playing with prey. It was a tactic designed to shred nerves, and it was working. His men sat scattered around the sparse cover, bodies tense, rifles cradled like lifelines. Dust clung to their sweat-soaked faces, turning them into pale specters. Dalton shifted his rifle across his knees, listening for the faintest sound on the wind. Silence again. Always silence. Harris spat onto the dirt, his jaw set hard. "Feels like they're waiting us out, picking their moment." Dalton nodded. "They want us moving. Don't give them the satisfaction." Mason crouched nearby, whispered, "Why don't they just rush us? They've got numbers, high ground. We're sitting ducks." "They don't want casualties," Dalton replied, his tone flat, clinical. "They want trophies, prisoners. They'd rather bleed us dry than lose men on a charge." The young SEAL shivered. Dalton caught it and his chest tightened. Mason was still green, talented, fast, but new to war's mind games. Keeping him steady was just as important as keeping his rifle loaded. Dalton reached over, squeezed his shoulder. "They underestimate us. That's their mistake. We use it." The night dragged on, each minute stretched like an hour. The silence punctuated by sporadic shots that pinged stone or whistled low over their heads. The valley floor became a cage, every movement an invitation to death. Dalton's throat was dry, his lips cracked from dust and fear, but his voice never wavered when he issued orders. He knew that if he broke, even for a second, the others would collapse with him. He checked on Ramirez. The medic had managed to slow the bleeding with pressure and field dressings, but his skin was clammy, his breath shallow. Dalton knelt, murmuring low, "Stay with us, Ram. Sun's coming up. We'll get you out." Ramirez opened his eyes, managed a faint grin. "You're full of shit, Chief." Dalton smirked despite himself. "And you're too stubborn to die, so we're even." Hours bled together. The men shifted quietly, conserving strength, rationing sips of water. Dalton tapped out another SOS, each press of the transmitter deliberate, a lifeline thrown into the void. Again, no answer. The silence aided him. He thought of his wife back in Norfolk, her laugh over morning coffee, the warmth of her hand on his wrist before he deployed. He thought of the promise he made, that he'd come home. Now, staring at the stars, coldly blinking above, he wondered if that promise had already been broken. But he couldn't let those thoughts show. Not here. Not now. Mason whispered again, breaking the long silence. "Chief, what if no one's listening?" Dalton turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto Mason's in the dim light. The kid's fear was raw, naked. He could hear it in his breath, see it in his trembling grip on the rifle. Dalton spoke calmly, with conviction he didn't fully feel. Somebody always listens. Might not be when you want, might not be when you think you need it, but someone hears. Trust that. Mason swallowed, nodding, forcing his hands to steady. Dalton knew he had to believe it too, or they were finished. When the sky began to gray with pre-dawn light, Dalton's exhaustion pressed hard on his shoulders. His body ached, his mind buzzed with tension, but his senses sharpened. He peered through the scope, scanning the cliffs. That's when he saw them. 4 figures shifting positions on the ridge. Their silhouettes flickered against the pale horizon, rifles catching faint glints of light. Dalton's chest tightened. The enemy was preparing for something. He tracked their movement, counting carefully. 4, maybe 5. He whispered updates to his men who adjusted silently. The ridge loomed above them like a wall of death, ready to collapse. Dalton pressed his finger to the trigger, steady, waiting. But then something else caught his eye. Across the valley, on the opposite ridge, a lone shape crouched low, perfectly still, barely distinguishable from the rocks. Dalton narrowed his eyes, adjusting the focus. For a moment he thought it was another hostile, but it didn't move. Like the others, it didn't shift nervously, didn't glance around. It waited, poised, patient. A glint flickered briefly, metal catching the dawn. A scope. Dalton's heart hammered, his mind raced. Was this another enemy sniper? Or... The silence around him deepened, pressing against his chest as if the entire valley held its breath. Dalton raised his rifle, unsure if he should fire, call out, or pray. And then the crack split the air. A rifleman on the ridge above him crumpled instantly, tumbling down the rocks with a scream that was cut short by bone and stone. Dalton froze, stunned. His men looked up sharply. Another crack thundered, and a second enemy collapsed. The insurgent line faltered, shouts echoing in panic. The hidden silhouette on the far ridge hadn't moved more than an inch, yet the battlefield had changed completely. Dalton's pulse surged. Someone was listening. Not through radios, not through commands, through a rifle. The first shot was clean, deliberate, merciless. One insurgent fell headlong down the rocks, his rifle clattering as his body crumpled in a spray of dust. The second shot came seconds later, puncturing the dawn with a crack that echoed across the valley. Another hostile dropped, lifeless, before the others even realized what was happening. Dalton's men froze, every eye jerking toward the opposite ridge. Mason's breath hitched audibly. Harris whispered, almost reverently, "Holy hell!" Dalton steadied his rifle against the stone, scanning the far ridge. There, blending with the jagged rocks, almost invisible, a silhouette crouched low. The shape hadn't shifted since the first shot. It was as though the figure had grown from the mountain itself, carved from stone and shadow. He felt his pulse racing, hammering in his chest. For hours, silence had been the enemy. Now, silence birthed something new, an unseen ally. The insurgents panicked. The confident fire from the ridgeline broke into chaos, shouts carrying across the rocks. One tried to reposition, guarding toward higher ground. The hidden sniper answered with surgical precision. Crack! A plume of dust, a body crumpling mid-sprint. Dalton's team pressed tighter to cover, stunned into silence. The medic, still cradling Ramirez, murmured, "That ain't one of us, is it?" Dalton's jaw tightened. "He's not shooting at us." Mason risked a peek over the rocks, then ducked back wide-eyed. "Chief, he's killing them faster than we can count." Dalton tapped his shoulder firm. "Stay sharp. Don't get stupid. Whoever he is, he's not invincible. And neither are we." The insurgents tried to rally. Dalton saw them reorganize, gesturing wildly, spreading across the ridge to flank the sniper. It was a desperate move, reckless, but it proved they were rattled. Their confidence had shattered. That's when Dalton understood the gravity of what was happening. This lone shooter wasn't just eliminating threats, he was controlling the battlefield. Every round dictated movement. Every kill rewrote the fight. The man was a ghost with a rifle, and he had shifted the valley's balance in less than a minute. Dalton exhaled slowly, trying to grasp the new reality. Relief coursed through him, but so did suspicion. Reinforcements weren't scheduled. For days, no quick reaction force had been nearby.
No Rangers, no Marines. So who the hell was this? His training screamed caution. In Afghanistan, trust could kill faster than a bullet. Was this sniper truly an ally, or some rogue element whose intentions aligned only temporarily? But the evidence was hard to deny. The man on the ridge was systematically dismantling the ambush, one shot at a time, giving Dalton and his team a lifeline they hadn't earned but desperately needed. Harris crawled closer, his face lined with grime and disbelief. "Chief, orders?" Dalton hesitated and gestured toward the left flank. "We use the window. Stay low. Conserve rounds. That sniper's doing the heavy lifting. We'll move when the line breaks." The men nodded, adrenaline sparking through exhaustion. For the first time in endless hours, hope flickered. Dalton glanced at Ramirez. His skin was pale, sweat-soaked, but his eyes fluttered open briefly. "We're not dead yet, Chief," he rasped. Dalton gave him the faintest smile. "Not today, Ram." The sniper fired again. Another hostile collapsed mid-step, head snapping back. Dalton caught the faint echo of metal shifting, a bolt sliding around a chambered. The rhythm was calm, unhurried, terrifying in its control. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just skilled, he was masterful. The insurgents scattered like frightened animals, ducking behind cover, trying to guess where death would strike next. Their coordinated ambush had dissolved into a panicked scramble. Dalton seized the chance. "Move!" he barked. Mason and Harris darted forward, sliding behind a cluster of boulders closer to the ridge. Dalton covered them with short bursts, each round measured. The sniper's shots answered in tandem, suppressing any threat that dared expose itself. The choreography was seamless, almost uncanny, as if the ghost on the ridge could read Dalton's mind. Minutes blurred into a deadly dance of cover, fire, and movement. The SEAL team crawled forward in increments, every advance shielded by the unseen marksman. The valley that had been their cage now offered corridors carved by precision fire. Dalton couldn't help but marvel at it. He had fought alongside some of the finest shooters in the SEALs, but this was something else. The sniper wasn't simply killing, he was conducting. Every shot was a note, every echo an instruction. Move here, hold there, wait, go. Dalton realized they were being guided, step by step, out of the jaws of death. Mason pressed against Dalton's side, panting, eyes wild. "Chief, you think he's one of ours? A Ranger? Delta? CIA?" Dalton didn't answer immediately. He watched the ridge through his scope, catching the faintest shift of camouflage netting fluttering with the wind. Whoever it was, he was no amateur. His concealment was flawless, his patience absolute. Finally, Dalton murmured, "He's American. You don't shoot like that unless you're ours." Mason swallowed, half relieved, half awed. "And why the hell hasn't he radioed?" Dalton's lips pressed thin. That was the question gnawing at him. The battle stretched into mid-morning. The insurgents, decimated and demoralized, finally broke. Shouts echoed across the ridge as the survivors retreated into the mountains, dragging wounded comrades. The sniper didn't chase them, he let them. Scatter, patient even in victory. Dalton's men sagged with exhaustion, slumping behind cover. The medic finally allowed himself a shaky breath as he checked Ramirez again. Harris muttered, "If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it." Dalton stared at the far ridge, searching for movement, but the sniper had gone, still again, indistinguishable from the mountain. Dalton tapped his radio once more, desperation softened by newfound hope. "Bravo 2 in contact. Unknown sniper support. Requesting confirmation. Grid 74. Static answered. The silence returned, heavier than before. But this time, Dalton felt something different. The silence wasn't empty. It wasn't abandonment. It was deliberate, intentional. Whoever that ghost on the ridge was, he had chosen silence over words, his bullets speaking loud enough. Dalton exhaled, gripping his rifle tighter. They weren't safe yet, but they weren't alone anymore either, and that changed everything. The fourth shot rang out, sharp and final. Dust plumed around a lifeless insurgent who collapsed across the ridge. By now, Dalton's men weren't even startled by the thunder of the unseen rifle. They were watching, learning, synchronizing with the phantom's rhythm. Every shot carved open a path. Every kill bought them another heartbeat of survival. Dalton crouched low, his chest heaving, eyes locked in the chaos unraveling above. For hours they'd been prey in this valley. Now they were witnesses to a reversal as sudden as it was brutal. The hunters had become the hunted. Mason couldn't contain it anymore. "Chief," he whispered, his voice shaking with awe. He's one of ours, right? No Taliban shoots like that." Dalton kept his eyes on the ridge. He watched an enemy try to reposition, then drop instantly as the Phantom's bullet found him mid-step. Dalton's jaw tightened. He's ours. Harris crawled closer, wiping grit from his sweat-streaked brow. Then why the hell hasn't he radioed? No radio, no call-out, nothing. Dalton didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure himself. All he knew was that silence had turned from their executioner into their savior. The insurgents scrambled, confusion tearing through their line. Shouts in Pashto echoed off the cliffs, commands laced with panic. Some tried to retreat down the slope, others clung to cover. Each time one revealed himself, the sniper struck. Crack. A pause. Crack. Every round hit home. The precision unsettled Dalton as much as it reassured him. He'd fought alongside top-tier shooters, but this was something else.
Ridge wasn't spraying fire, wasn't wasting a single shot. He was dismantling the ambush like a surgeon, cutting away the enemy piece by piece. Dalton forced his voice steady. "Harris, Mason, move left flank. I'll cover." The men obeyed, sprinting low between rocks. As they moved, Dalton laid down controlled bursts, not to kill, but to keep heads ducked. The sniper shots aligned perfectly with his, striking down any enemy who dared rise. The choreography was seamless, uncanny. They pressed forward. Each meter gained felt like a stolen miracle. The valley that had been there 2 hours ago now became their battlefield again. Dalton risked another glance through his scope. For the briefest second, he saw the sniper, rifle, long matte black, fitted with an optic he recognized. Military issue, American. That answered one question, but it sparked another. Why here? Why alone? The Phantom shifted only once, crawling to a new nest, blending into stone and brush like smoke dissolving in air. Dalton almost lost him entirely until the next crack announced his presence again. The SEAL team tightened formation, dragging Ramirez between them. His face was bloodless, jaw clenched against the agony. The medic whispered constant reassurances, though Dalton could see the doubt etched deep in his eyes. Without medevac, Ramirez's time was slipping. Dalton pushed them harder. "Stay moving. Don't let up." Another insurgent screamed from the ridge as the sniper tore him down. Mason muttered half to himself. "It's like he sees everything before it happens." Dalton felt the same chill. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just firing, he was orchestrating. Every kill seemed less like chance and more like instruction. Oh, here, hold there, now move. Minutes stretched into an hour of brutal crawl and cover. By late morning, the battlefield had shifted entirely. What remained of the insurgent ambush was shattered, their morale broken. Some fled outright into the jagged folds of the mountains. Others hunkered down, paralyzed by fear of exposing themselves. Dalton's men collapsed behind a cluster of large boulders, lungs burning, sweat streaking through grime. Harris let out a low, disbelieving laugh. "Chief, we shouldn't even be alive. Not after last night. Not after—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Who the hell is this guy? Dalton glanced at the far ridge. The Phantom had moved, the rifle still pointed into the valley, watching, waiting. "I don't know," Dalton admitted quietly, "but we're breathing because of him." The medic jacked Ramirez again, frowning. "We're out of time. If we don't get him evac soon, he's gone." Dalton's chest clenched. He carried brothers home in body bags before. He wasn't letting it happen again. He keyed the emergency transmitter one more time. SOS. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. He waited, straining his ears. Static. His heart sank. No one was coming. Then another shot rang out. Not at them, not at the insurgents, but high into the rock wall above. A chunk of stone exploded, dust cascading down. It wasn't random, it was a signal. Dalton froze. The sniper was communicating. The message was clear. Move. Dalton didn't hesitate. "On me, now," he barked. They shifted left, hauling Ramirez while the sniper provided invisible cover. Each time an insurgent twitched from hiding, the crack of a rifle put him back down.
The SEALs moved in rhythm with the phantom, like marionettes pulled by unseen strings. Mason whispered through ragged breaths, "Chief, he's guiding us. He's showing us the way out." Dalton's gut twisted. Mason was right, but the question still lingered. Why? By noon, the SEALs had clawed their way into a narrow ravine, shielded from most enemy angles. For the first time since the ambush began, the valley fell silent, truly silent. The men collapsed in exhaustion, sucking down shallow sips of water, checking ammo counts. They were alive, barely, but alive. Dalton crouched at the mouth of the ravine, staring across the expanse. The phantom was gone. No movement, no glint of glass, no sound of a bolt sliding home. He had vanished as suddenly as he appeared. Harris muttered, "Like a damn ghost." Dalton didn't reply. He just stared at the empty ridge, his mind buzzing with unanswered questions. Whoever that sniper was, he hadn't come for recognition. He hadn't come for thanks. But in the crucible of silence, he had answered their SOS in the only language he spoke: bullets. A silence pressed in, thicker than heat. Dalton crouched at the mouth of the ravine, his M4 steady in his hands, scanning the ridge where the phantom sniper had last been seen. Nothing, no shimmer, no shadow, no movement, just the vast emptiness of Afghan stone and sky. Behind him, the SEALs huddled around Ramirez. His breaths were shallow, his skin ashen. The medic worked fast, hands slick with sweat and blood, but it was a losing battle. "Chief," Harris rasped, his voice barely above a whisper, "we need an exfil. He won't last much longer." Dalton nodded grimly. He knew. He tried the radio again. Nothing but static hissed in his ear. The Taliban had jammed frequencies, or maybe their gear had just given up after hours of punishment. Either way, no cavalry was coming. Dalton's mind worked fast. They needed higher ground, a vantage point to push a distress signal past the ridgelines. But every path was choked with enemy presence. That's when Mason's voice cut in. "Chief, look!" Dalton followed his gaze. On the cliff face ahead, etched in dust and shadow, were 3 fresh bullet impacts, clean and precise, in the unmistakable pattern of an arrow, pointing east. The phantom hadn't left. Dalton's gut twisted. He wanted answers, wanted to lay eyes on whoever was pulling their strings, but there was no time for suspicion, not with Ramirez fading. "Pack it up," Dalton ordered. "We're moving east. Ghost wants us alive, and right now I'll take the help." The team moved out, staying low, dragging Ramirez on an improvised litter. The valley was brutal, jagged rock, thorn brush, searing heat that turned their armor into ovens. Each step was a war of its own. Still, the sniper's trail guided them. At each fork in the terrain, they'd find another marker, impact in stone, a fresh crack in dirt, silent breadcrumbs written in gunfire. The men followed, wary but obedient. Harris muttered as he trudged, "It feels like we're walking in some ghost's footprint, like he's 2 steps ahead of us always." Dalton didn't disagree. He felt it too. This wasn't just cover fire anymore. This was direction.
Orchestrated, intentional, and it left a gnawing question in Dalton's chest. Why risk so much for them? 2 hours into the march, the trap was sprung. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs, insurgents who'd regrouped, laying down a curtain of rounds. Bullets ricocheted off rock, kicking dust into their lungs. Mason dove dragging Ramirez's litter behind cover, while Harris returned fire with vicious bursts. Dalton swore. They were pinned again. Then came the crack. 1 shot. A man on the ridge crumpled. Another shot, clean surgical, dropped a second. The phantom was back, but this time the insurgents adapted. They spread, flanking harder, forcing the SEALs deeper into the ravine. Dalton's pulse spiked. Their mysterious ally couldn't cover every angle. "Frag out," Harris barked, tossing a grenade upslope. The explosion bought them seconds, smoke rolling down like a curtain. Dalton seized the moment, signaling forward. They scrambled, firing controlled bursts, pushing through the chaos. The phantom's rifle sang again, each crack splitting the air, each kill buying ground. Still, the fight was brutal. Dalton felt shrapnel sting his arm, a grazing burn. Mason's helmet took a glancing round that rang his skull. They kept moving. Finally, silence. The last insurgent fled, screaming into the rocks, vanishing like smoke on wind. The SEALs collapsed against boulders, lungs heaving. The medic worked frantically over Ramirez, who was barely hanging on. Harris spat grit and cursed. "We're running on luck and ghost fire." Dalton's gaze drifted back to the ridge. A shadow flickered there, barely perceptible, a figure, prone, watching, the sniper. Dalton locked eyes through the scope of his rifle, but before he could speak, the figure melted into the stone and disappeared. Again, by dusk, they reached a plateau. The air cooled, shadows stretching long across the valley. Dalton pulled out the emergency beacon, adjusting its signal strength. Higher here, maybe it would cut through the interference. He pressed the trigger. A green light blinked. The device pulsed its cry into the endless sky. Dalton stared upward as if sheer will could drag a bird or drone into sight. Nothing came, not yet. He lowered the beacon, jaw tight. Another silence, another void. But then Mason pointed far ahead. Carved into the dirt by a bullet's path was another symbol. This one wasn't an arrow. It was a circle, a perimeter, a safe zone. The sniper was telling them to hold position. Dalton's instinct screamed against it. Staying still meant exposure, but exhaustion had drained the men to husks. Ramirez was slipping fast, and whoever this ghost was, he hadn't steered them wrong yet. "Set perimeter," Dalton ordered. His men obeyed, dropping into firing positions. Night fell like a curtain. Hours dragged by, the desert cold, biting harder than the day's heat. The SEALs took shifts, eyes sweeping the dark, ears straining for movement. Harris whispered during his watch, "Chief, it's like he's protecting us, like he knows what's coming." Dalton stayed silent. His eyes kept drifting to the ridgelines, hunting shadows. He couldn't shake the unease. Protection had a cost. Nobody fought like this without reason. The night deepened. The stars burned cold. Ramirez's breaths grew weaker. And then, faint in the distance, came the unmistakable sound of rotors. The men jerked upright. Dalton's chest surged with hope. Helicopters. Medevac. Extraction. They weren't alone after all. But almost immediately, gunfire erupted again. Tracer rounds lit the sky. The Taliban had set an anti-air trap. The bird pulled wide, circling, unable to land in the kill zone. Dalton swore, slamming a fist into rock. Hope was within reach, yet slipping. Then came the crack of the Phantom's rifle, one after another. Shots cut down insurgents who were aiming skyward. The sniper wasn't just protecting the SEALs now, he was protecting the sky. The firefight raged across the valley, bullets and tracers streaking through the night like fireworks. The SEALs returned fire from below, forcing the enemy to split their attention. The sniper above never missed, his rounds stitching precision death into the insurgent ranks. Dalton yelled into his radio, voice raw, "Bird, this is Valkyrie. We're here, marking with IR." He waved his infrared strobe, praying it cut through the chaos. The pilot's voice cracked back, strained but clear. "Copy. Valkyrie, you've got 30 seconds. We can't hover longer." Dalton's blood surged. They had one chance. "Move!" he roared. The SEALs broke from cover, dragging Ramirez toward the landing zone. The sniper had circled. Bullets screamed around them, dirt exploding under their boots. Harris laid suppressive fire. Mason stumbled under the litter's weight. Dalton covered their flank. Above, the Phantom's rifle worked like a metronome of death, every second beat punctuated by another fallen enemy. The helicopter descended, rotor wash tearing the valley floor. The side door gunners opened up, shredding enemy positions. Dalton and his men dove inside, dragging Ramirez up with the last of their strength. As the bird lifted, Dalton leaned out the open door, scanning the ridge one last time. There, a silhouette against the stars, the Phantom sniper, prone on the rock, rifle steady. Dalton raised a fist in silent salute. For the first time, the sniper shifted, a nod, subtle, almost imperceptible. Then he rolled away, swallowed by darkness. The SEALs were airborne, battered but alive, and in the valley below, silence reclaimed the ground. A silence that once had been their executioner, and now their salvation. The silence didn't last. It never did in Afghanistan. The sun hung mercilessly overhead, baking the ravine into a kill. Dalton's men lay scattered in the meager shade of boulders, chests rising and falling in uneven rhythm. Dust clung to their skin, salt from sweat etched pale streaks through grime. They looked less like a team of elite operators and more like survivors of a shipwreck. Ramirez stirred, groaning softly. The medic pressed a hand to his chest, whispering steady reassurances while checking the wound. The bleeding was slowed, but not stopped. Time was the enemy now, more ruthless than bullets. Dalton crouched near the mouth of the ravine, his rifle propped on his knee, scanning the ridges. He expected to see the phantom again, some flicker of glass, some faint silhouette. But nothing stirred. Only heat haze danced across stone. For the first time in hours, they were utterly alone. Mason broke the quiet. "Chief, you think he's
Gone? Maybe that was it. Maybe he saved our asses, and that's all." Dalton shook his head. "He didn't save us. He moved us." Harris frowned. "Moved us where?" Dalton ran a finger along the map folded in his lap, tracing the jagged terrain lines. "We're close to an old goat trail. If it's clear, it could take us west, toward higher ground. At Hercones. He's hurting us there." The medic lensed up, tense. "If Ramirez is going to make it, we need that trail. We need air support." Dalton's jaw tightened. He had already sent countless distress calls. None had pierced the silence, except one had been answered. Not from headquarters, not from command, but by a phantom with a rifle. They moved at first light the next morning. The team rose like ghosts, silent and heavy-footed. Dalton led, Harris covering rear. Ramirez dragged gently on a makeshift litter between Mason and the medic. Every step felt dangerous, every shadow a threat. Then the first crack of the rifle split the dawn. Dalton dropped instantly, eyes snapping toward the sound, but the round hadn't been aimed at them. Far above, on a ridge parallel to their movement, an insurgent crumbled before he'd even leveled his weapon. A phantom was still with them. Dalton raised a fist, signaling the team forward. They obeyed without hesitation, almost relieved. At the thunder overhead, the sniper shots became punctuation to their march, short, decisive, final. Whenever an insurgent stirred, he erased them. Whatever danger loomed, he answered it before it arrived. It was more than overwatch, it was control. By midday, they reached the trail Dalton had studied. It wasn't much, a narrow, rocky ledge hugging the side of a cliff, barely wide enough for 2 boots side by side. One slip and a man would vanish into the abyss below. His seals hesitated at its edge. Mason muttered, "Looks like hell's tightrope." Dalton went first, testing each step, rifle slung as he gripped jagged rock with his free hand. The wind screamed along the cliff, hot and dry, threatening balance. One by one, the others followed, dragging Ramirez with painful slowness. Halfway across, a voice carried up the canyon, shouts, angry, insistent. "Taliban!" Dalton froze. Figures peered on the opposite ridge, rifles glinting. Shouts grew louder, echoing. The enemy had found them. The first rounds cracked past, spitting sparks off stone. The seals dropped flat against the ledge, nowhere to hide, nothing to shield them. It was the worst place to be caught. Dalton's pulse hammered. He squeezed his radio again, desperate. "This is Alpha 7, under fire, request immediate support, grid." Static drowned him out. No answer. He braced for the end, and thunder roared from above. A phantom had returned with vengeance. The first enemy shooter spun backwards, a hole where his chest had been. Another collapsed with his rifle tumbling into the canyon. Crack, crack, each shot precise, merciless. Dalton's men scrambled, dragging Ramirez faster, inching along the ledge as the phantom shredded the opposition. The cliffside became a gallery of falling bodies, screams echoing into the void. Still more poured in. The Taliban weren't retreating this time. They were angry, determined. Dalton risked a glance back. The sniper was no longer hidden. For a heartbeat through the blur of distance, Dalton spotted him, a lone figure prone atop a rock outcrop, rifle steady, scarf whipping in the wind. He wasn't Taliban, the rifle was American, and the face, though too far to see clearly, was pale. Dalton's gut clenched. He knew this wasn't a ghost. It was a man, a soldier, one of theirs. But why here? Why alone? The firefight raged for what felt like hours. Dalton's team crept, crawled, and stumbled across the ledge, each movement shielded by invisible cover. The phantom never missed, not once. Finally, they reached the other side, collapsing behind jagged rocks. Harris dropped beside Dalton, chest heaving. "Chief, tell me I'm not losing my damn mind. That's one of ours, isn't it?"
Dalton didn't answer. His throat was dry, his heart torn. He couldn't shake the glimpse of that pale face in the scope's shimmer, a face that shouldn't have been there. The sniper's rifle thundered one last time, silencing the final insurgent. Then quiet. Not the hostile silence from before. This one was deliberate, chosen. The phantom had vanished again. Night fell heavy. The SEALs huddled in the dark, nursing wounds, rationing water, whispering about the ghost who fought like a guardian angel. Dalton stayed awake, back against stone, eyes on the ridges. He couldn't sleep, not with the questions clawing at him. He knew the Army sniper units knew their areas of operation. Whoever this man was, he wasn't where he belonged. The medic checked Ramirez again, shaking his head grimly. "Another day, Chief. That's all I can give him." Dalton closed his eyes. Another day. That was what the phantom seemed to be buying them. Time, nothing more. A time for what? At dawn, a single shot cracked again. Not at the Taliban, not at them. The bullet struck a lone tree trunk above the goat trail, splintering bark. Dalton understood instantly. It was a signal. The phantom was calling them forward. He turned to his men, eyes hard. "Pack up, we're moving." Harris hesitated. "Chief, where? We don't even know what he wants." Dalton slung his rifle. "Doesn't matter. He hasn't missed yet." And though doubt gnawed at him, he couldn't shake the truth. They had no other hope. They followed the phantom's invisible path, step by step, shot by shot, like pawns across a battlefield only he could see. Dalton felt the unease settle deeper in his chest. Every choice was no longer his. Every move had been bargained, dictated by a man in the shadows. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were part of someone else's war. And Dalton knew with a sinking weight in his gut that sooner or later he'd have to meet the phantom face to face. The morning sun broke across the horizon like molten iron, painting the cliffs with sharp shadows. Dalton's team moved cautiously along the narrow trail the phantom had marked with shots. Every echo of gunfire from the previous night lingered in their ears, a rhythm ingrained into muscle memory. Ramirez was fading. His breaths came shallow, ragged, each one a whispered battle. The medic worked tirelessly, but he knew the wound was serious. Every foot forward was a race against the clock, every step a gamble with fate. Dalton's jaw tightened. The path ahead was unforgiving, a serrated ridge climbing toward higher ground. They had to move, but the terrain offered little cover.
One misstep, and the valley would claim them. Crack! A sniper's voice, though silence, spoke again. A round struck a jagged rock, splintering it inches from Dalton's head. He froze. Another shot hit a tree behind Harris. The pattern was unmistakable. Dalton exhaled slowly, letting the rhythm sink in. The phantom was not simply covering, they were being directed. Every shot, every echo dictated movement. "Keep tight," Dalton whispered. "Follow the fire. We move where he wants us." Harris glanced up at the reach above, eyes narrowing. "I still don't get it. Who the hell is he?" Dalton didn't answer. He had a suspicion, and it chilled him. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just skilled. He was surgical, precise, predator in plain sight. The team continued, dragging Ramirez with painstaking care. Mason kept a hand on the litter, eyes scanning for movement. The desert wind whipped dust across the cliff, cutting visibility. Every shadow was suspect. Every crevice might hide death. Suddenly, crack! Another insurgent went down mid-sprint. Dalton realized the sniper had anticipated enemy movements again. "He knows them," Dalton muttered under his breath. "Knows their tactics, maybe even their positions before they even move." The thought made the hair on his neck stand. This was no ordinary marksman. This was someone with intimate knowledge of insurgent patterns, a soldier who had been inside these battles before and survived. Hours passed, and the plateau they had been heading toward finally rose ahead. The team slowed, exhausted, sweat dripping, muscles screaming. The trail ended at a ridge with minimal cover. The phantom's last shot had fallen a few meters ahead, signaling them forward. Dalton assessed. "We're exposed, but that's the next move. Mason, Harris, cover. Medic, Ramirez stays low. We go together." One by one, they surged forward, dragging Ramirez across the last stretch. Each step was nerve-wracking. Bullets kicked up rocks and dust around them. Dalton's rifle barked over the wind, suppressing threats just as the sniper had orchestrated. They reached a rock outcropping that offered temporary respite. Dalton's pulse hammered in his chest. He could see the valley stretched beneath him.
insurgents scattered and demoralized after repeated sniper strikes. Somewhere along the line, he realized the Phantom wasn't just protecting them, he was shaping the battlefield entirely. Dalton's mind raced. Who was he? Delta? Navy? CIA? Some contractor with skills beyond imagination? Whoever it was, he had saved their lives multiple times, and yet there was no contact, no acknowledgement, no communication beyond gunfire. The quiet moments offered no answers, only questions. Crack. Another shot, this one closer. Dalton ducked instinctively, scanning the ridge. He caught a glint, a fleeting flash. The Phantom had shifted position, not just firing, now moving strategically. Dalton felt a surge of respect, awe, and unease. They were being shepherded, guided by a man who could kill from impossible angles, whose presence was unseen, whose motives were unknowable. Harris shook his head. I can't believe this. That's one man, one guy is keeping us alive. Dalton didn't respond. He knew the truth. One man, one ghost, and that ghost might have reasons for everything, reasons he would never share. Night fell again. The desert cooled, stars glittering like shards of ice across the sky. Dalton's team huddled behind rocks, whispering, resting and checking ammunition. Ramirez's condition worsened. The medic shook his head at every shallow breath. Dalton stayed awake, eyes scanning the cliffs. Then he noticed a faint shadow atop a ridge. The Phantom had returned, prone, rifle glinting under moonlight, steady, deliberate. Dalton's breath caught. He didn't raise his rifle, not yet. He wanted to see the face, to confirm the truth. A second shot aimed at a distant insurgent cracked the silence. The Phantom wasn't engaging them directly anymore. He was securing the perimeter, watching, waiting. Dalton finally spoke, low and cautious. He's American, he whispered. I know it. I can feel it. Harris glanced up at the ridge. Then why doesn't he talk to us? Dalton shook his head. He has his reasons. Doesn't mean we like it. The silence stretched, and the Phantom moved again, rolled behind cover, fired, disappeared. Every move communicated something Dalton couldn't yet decipher. But one thing was clear. They were on borrowed time. The enemy was reorganizing, testing the edges of the sealed perimeter. Crack! Crack! Shots rang out. Dalton's men scrambled for cover as insurgents tried to infiltrate, but the Phantom's rifles sang again, one target after another falling with unnerving precision. Dalton pushed forward, dragging Ramirez toward higher ground. Adrenaline mixed with fear. Every step, every decision was guided by the unseen sniper. It was surreal, a deadly choreography. And yet, Dalton felt a knowing truth. This ghost was not just helping them survive, he was teaching them. Every shot, every movement, every silence was a lesson. By dawn, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley floor. Dalton could see the remnants of the ambush scattered below, bodies, destroyed cover, and a quiet that spoke louder than words. Dalton signaled his men to hold position. Mason and Harris lowered themselves beside him, breathing hard. The medic leaned over Ramirez, who was barely conscious. The Phantom remained atop a distant ridge, barely visible. Dalton squinted, eyes narrowing. He had to know. He raised his rifle, not to shoot, but to focus. The figure moved, crouched, then paused. In that fleeting moment, Dalton glimpsed a face, a pale, weathered face he knew from classified operations intel. Recognition struck him like lightning. The sniper was someone he'd never expected to meet in this hellhole. Someone legendary, someone he thought was lost to the shadows of secret war. Dalton's mind raced. Questions, doubts, and awe collided. The man had saved their lives multiple times, and yet he hadn't come forward, hadn't spoken a word, hadn't sought acknowledgement. Dalton whispered, almost to himself, "It's you." The Phantom's eyes met his through the scope, a brief, fleeting connection. Then the figure rolled behind cover, rifle steady, silent as ever. Dalton realized the truth. Survival had a price, and that price was obedience to a ghost whose motives were his own. The sun climbed higher. The SEALs needed to move again, to find extraction, to save Ramirez. Dalton gave the signal. Mason and Harris nodded. The medic braced against the cliff as they lifted Ramirez. Careful, but urgent. Crack! Another shot from the Phantom. A distant insurgent went down. The ghost's rifle spoke a single message: move, live, survive. Dalton felt the weight of responsibility crushing his chest. He wanted to thank the sniper, wanted to know the reasons, wanted to see the face without the veil of distance and darkness. But the rules were clear. The ghost remained unseen, untouchable, a specter of war. The SEALs continued across the plateau, every sense on edge, hearts racing. They were survivors, but their lives had been irrevocably altered. Dalton glanced back one final time. The phantom remained on the ridge, watching, guarding, calculating. Then, slowly, the figure retreated, disappearing into shadows. Dalton exhaled. Relief washed over him, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the ghost could vanish at any moment, leaving only questions and gratitude in his wake. And one truth remained. They had survived by skill, by will, and by the unseen hand of a man who moved like death itself, precise, silent, merciless, and utterly loyal to his own secret war. Dalton pressed onward, dragging Ramirez. He knew the final confrontation was coming, and when it did, he would have to meet the ghost, face to face. The wind cut across the plateau like a blade, carrying dust and the faint metallic scent of spent gunpowder. Dalton crouched low, eyes scanning the ridges for any movement. Ramirez moaned weakly, the medic holding him close, murmuring reassurances that sounded hollow even to himself. Every muscle in Dalton's body ached from the march, from the firefights, from the hours of adrenaline and fear. The sun climbed higher, making the rocks. Shadows shifted, giving the illusion of movement. And then, atop the furthest ridge, Dalton saw him, the phantom. The sniper had shifted position again, lying prone, rifle steady, scanning the horizon with unnerving calm. A faint glint of stope glass caught the sunlight. Dalton could see the outline, the posture, the experience. He exhaled slowly, muscles tense, knowing the man above was not just any soldier. Dalton whispered, almost to himself, "It's you. All this time, it's really you." Harris glanced over, following Dalton's gaze. "Who is it?" Dalton shook his head. "Someone I never expected. Someone gone, thought lost." The phantom moved again, deliberate, precise. Another insurgent attempting to flank the SEALs fell before he even had a chance to aim. The ghost was still orchestrating, still directing, still fighting a battle invisible to everyone but those under his protection. Dalton's mind raced. This man had saved them repeatedly, yet he had chosen silence. His motives were hidden, his allegiance clear only in action. Dalton knew the only way to survive the next move was to trust him implicitly. "Medic, Ramirez needs evac now, no more delays," Dalton ordered, and the medic nodded, tears streaking his dusty face. "I'm doing all I can." Dalton pressed forward, signaling his team to move across the plateau toward the extraction point. The phantom had subtly cleared with his previous shots. Each step felt heavier, the sun beating down, the wind whipping dust into their faces. Crack! A distant shot tore through the air. Dalton froze, heart hammering. The phantom was covering their advance. As they reached the plateau's edge, insurgents surged again from the canyon below. Dalton's team ducked behind rocks, returning fire. Mason's bursts cut into the ranks. Harris covered the rear, and the medic struggled to shield Ramirez. The phantom shots echoed above like a deadly heartbeat. Each round was precise, each kill surgically placed. Dalton realized they were not just surviving, they were being guided, orchestrated into a narrow path of safety by a master tactician who operated like a shadow in the mountains. It was awe-inspiring, terrifying. Dalton's focus sharpened. He had to confront the phantom. He needed to know who had risked so much for them, why he had chosen this method, and what had driven him to appear in a valley thousands of miles from any familiar battlefield. He scanned the ridge, then spoke into his radio, voice low and steady. "Phantom, we're approaching the extraction zone. Identify yourself. You've earned that much." No response. Only silence. Dalton's stomach tightened. That silence was deliberate, absolute, unyielding. The ghost had his rules, and Dalton would have to respect them. The plateau ended at a narrow cliffside path, jagged and exposed. Dalton led, dragging Ramirez, every step calculated, every breath measured. The helicopter was still visible in the distance, circling, waiting, vulnerable to enemy fire if they delayed. Another crack split the morning air. Dalton's pulse spiked. The Phantom was repositioning, caking down insurgents, attempting to gain high ground, shaping the battlefield yet again. Dalton whispered to Mason and Harris, "He's not just protecting us, he's controlling the fight. Follow his lead. Every shot tells us where to go." The team edged forward, finally reaching the landing zone. Rotor wash kicked up dirt and dust, obscuring vision, rattling nerves. The helicopter hovered, side doors open, gunners providing cover fire. The extraction was tense. Insurgents still lurked, testing the edges of the perimeter. Dalton glanced back at the ridge. A lone figure remained, prone, rifle glinting in sunlight. The Phantom's eyes met his again, a fleeting acknowledgement. Dalton felt a chill. This was a soldier who had walked through war's fire and emerged both deadly and disciplined, loyal yet unattached. He moved closer, rifle steady, trying to make the figure see him. For a brief second, the wind shifted. Dalton's heart raced as the figure finally rose, rifle slung, scarf whipping across his face. Dalton recognized him instantly. A soldier thought lost in classified operations years ago, presumed dead in a covert mission that had ended in disaster, or so the world believed. The Phantom's eyes met Dalton's, sharp, wary, calculating. Dalton swallowed hard. "You're alive," he whispered. The ghost gave the faintest nod, almost imperceptible, then crouched back into prone position. His identity confirmed, yet his silence remained intact. The extraction had become immediate. Dalton gave the signal. Harris, Mason, and the medic lifted Ramirez onto the helicopter's ramp with painstaking care. Dalton followed last, keeping his eyes on the ridge. The Phantom fired one last series of shots, covering their ascent.
Insurgent, attempting to reach the plateau, fell with precision. Dalton understood. The ghost was ensuring they left the ground safely before vanishing into shadows once again. The helicopter lifted off, road awash tearing the desert air. Dalton sat beside Ramirez, watching the plateau shrink beneath him. The Phantom remained on the ridge, watching silently. Dalton wanted to call out, to thank him, to demand answers, but the man had vanished again, a ghost once more. Dalton's chest ached. Relief surged alongside frustration and awe. They were alive. Ramirez would survive, but the Phantom remained untouchable, inscrutable. The man had saved lives, orchestrated battles, and disappeared without recognition or reward. Dalton realized the truth. This was war's quietest hero, invisible, lethal, unbound. As the helicopter moved toward safety, Dalton reflected. The valley, the ambush, the relentless pursuit, everything had been part of the Phantom's careful guidance. Survival had been choreographed, every shot a note, every silence a command. Dalton's respect grew beyond words. This man was more than a soldier. He was a force of nature, a shadow walking among men, precise, deadly, and profoundly loyal to his own code. Ramirez stirred, weak but conscious. The medic checked him carefully. Dalton felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had survived against impossible odds. Every member of the team was battered, exhausted, but alive. Dalton's eyes drifted back to the ridge, searching one last time. The Phantom was gone. Only the memory of the man remained etched into the landscape, in their minds, in the echo of every shot that had guided them to safety. Dalton whispered under his breath, a promise to the ghost he might never meet again. "Thank you. We won't forget." The helicopter soared over the mountains, the valley disappearing beneath them. Dalton looked at his team, Mason, Harris, the medic, and Ramirez, finally breathing easier. Relief and exhaustion mingled in their faces. They had survived against impossible odds, by skill, by will, and by the guiding hand of a ghost whose presence had shaped the battle without a single word. Dalton understood that in war, not all heroes wear insignias or step into the light. Some operate in silence, in shadows, and their valor is measured in lives saved, in battles turned, and in the ghosts left behind. The valley remained silent below, the aftermath of battle etched into every rock, every ridge, every shadow. Dalton knew the Phantom sniper would vanish again, leaving only questions, gratitude, and the undeniable proof that one man, hidden, unseen, untouchable, had changed the course of their lives.
The sun rose higher, golden and unforgiving, as the helicopter carried them away from the deadly ravine. Dalton leaned back, muscles sore, mind racing with the image of the ghost atop the ridge. The man had been precise, merciless, protective, and utterly alone. Dalton understood one truth above all. Some battles are fought in silence, and some saviors never reveal themselves. The SEALs had survived, and somewhere out there, the Phantom waited, watching, guarding, invisible, unstoppable. And for Dalton, that was enough.